Thank you everyone for joining me. This is LSid932 on YouTube. This is a recap and review of Grotesquerie. I wish to thank you all who have been subscribing, and I would like to encourage you to continue by sharing, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel for those of you who are new here. And I'm hoping that you enjoy the season finale. I should warn you, I didn't really enjoy it that much. I should warn you. But it has some great findings, some interesting things that we can all learn from. So as I said, it is Grotesquerie, Season 1, Episode 10. So we see Lois is driving and she's trying not to get emotional. She's driving, her eyes are welling up, she's about to cry, and she's just trying not to break down while driving. So she's driving until night falls and she just keeps on driving. And she stops and wipes the red substance from her face. Remember, when we left Lois, she was in a room with Megan and she unalived Justin after he was abusing Megan, beating her up. So Lois stops, she puts on her jacket and she continues to drive home. And there are candles all over the table when she walks in. When she walks in, there is Marshall sitting at the dining table and Red is cooking in the kitchen. And I'm like, where's Maisie? Where's the maid Maisie? So Lois is like, you can't be here. Y'all can't be in my house. And Marshall is just sitting at the table, just relaxing, having a glass of wine. And Marshall starts making her a cocktail and talking. He says, we have all screwed up a lot. And there's so much worth holding on to. The daughter needs them to be a united front. So let's all live together. And I'm like, live together? Marshall finishes her drink and slides it across the table to her, a martini. Okay? So she's like, this is a show. And we have served each other divorce papers. Marshall's like, nothing's final yet. Nothing's final. And I'm like, this is a far cry from the Marshall who was like, is this it? Is this it? Is this all we gonna say and do? Is this it? Am I supposed to be grateful? Now all of a sudden Marshall has changed and now we should all live together and be a family. And Lois is like, we are not going to share the same bed. What is this? He's like, oh, no, that part is over. He's like, I don't want you like that. That part is over. And Red is like, Marshall and I could have the guest room and you could still stay in your main room. And Lois is like, you okay with this, Red? Red is like, I did live in a commune one time, so. And Marshall's like, the old ways don't work. I do love you. I don't hate you, but, we can live together. And Lois is like, don't tell me I'm still in a coma dream. Lois, I would have thought the same thing. Don't tell me I am in this dream. So Marshall's like, please, Lois, I need the both of you. Lois is like, I will serve you the divorce papers and you just be at peace, be who you are, but you ain't gonna be here with me. Lois continues to say, there's accountability in everything, so please just go. So Red is driving Marshall home. And it is dark. It's a dark scene in the car, and Marshall looks like he is shell-shocked. Red is like, how the F did I end up in this awful desert town? It offers nothing. No decent movie theater, no decent florist, or even a bagel. I hate it here. Now, Red, I could, attest to this. I miss my New York City bagels quite often. But I'm not in a desert town. So Marshall's like, I thought you liked the quiet. She's like, yeah, no. I think I hate you too, Marshall. It's like, I should tell you, I know, I found out. So why seduce me and you didn't really want me? And Marshall is like, what are you talking about? So Red is like, one of the women came and spoke to the other faculty wives. You should curb your compulsion. She went along with the plan to talk to Lois only because she knew Lois would turn him down and she wanted to be present for his humiliation. Wow, Red. Wow, Red. You wanted to be there to see Lois turn him down. Okay. So Marshall turns to look at her while she's driving, and he's looking at her in a very sinister way. I wasn't liking it. I was like, Marshall, don't go to sleep first tonight. I was just, ooh, okay. Red goes on to talk and says she needs to get to the club and check on the girls. Marshall's like, I have so much love to share. I love you. I love my wife. She's like, I know, but you have until the end of the week to clear out and be gone. It'll be like you didn't exist. Like a bad dream, which is meant to be forgotten. And then Red drives off, leaving Marshall standing on the curb, looking at her drive away. So in the coma dreams, you know, did we see much about the folks when they were away from Lois? I know we saw some, but it seems to me like in the coma dreams, we saw a lot of Lois being in the picture. We have Marshall lecturing, and then he is talking very verbose. And, oh, yes, and this is what it is, and this is what society has become. And then he is eyeing a student. She's got heart eyes for him, and he's kind of looking at her with interest. We have other students shaking their heads at him, and he's paying them no mind. So, Captain Megan and the Dream Captain, which I didn't learn her name from this recap. The Dream Captain is standing with Megan at the back of the class. Okay? He stops yelling in the lecture when they walk in, and he sits on the edge of the stage to talk softly. So he's talking, he's like, this is what it is, this is what it has become, blah, blah, blah. Because he kind of like, it's like the final act in a play. So the chief and the officer say a student made serious charges against him. Her name is Mary Colesby. Marshall's in disbelief. He's like, this was consenting adults. It is not a violation. They parted on good terms. Megan's like, I'm not going to cuff you. I'm not going to make a spectacle of this, but you are in custody. He's like, what about my work? What about my teaching? You know, the other cop is like, based on your past, you'll be fired. Marshall's like, what about my word? I will fight this. This is another instance of a black male being strung up by a woman. I was like, Marshall, this ain't it. According to Red, you have a thing for the faculty wives. You have a thing for students. This is your MO. So it was going to catch up with you, even if it's a violation of the fraternization policy, Marshall. Come on. So he goes and he shows them a text of her contacting him. Can we meet up for coffee? And other flattering text messages. And they're both not believing him. So Megan's like, the DA has decided to go with this. And she tends to believe the woman, meaning Megan. Megan believes the woman in these matters. And we understand why, because of her instances with Justin. So Marshall is in shock. Megan said, this is an addiction, isn't it? And the other cop says, call your lawyer, Marshall. Call your lawyer. Marshall is booked and processed, and then he's released. Megan suggests that he find some help. We hear Marshall, philosophizing on what is happening. We're hearing his voice while he is packing up in the background, putting stuff in his suitcase. He is writing down a letter. He leaves it on Red's table with his ring on it. And it's on top of like a dossier kind of folder. And I'm like, what is that? So he leaves the letter, the ring on the tabletop, and then he sits on the bed. And his head is hanging down. And I'm like, what's going on, Marshall? So Marshall wakes up and he is in the hospital bed. He's looking up at the light and he's like, am I no longer here? And Red said, no. What you didn't do it. You're a man, your size on a full stomach. What you took wouldn't do what you wanted to do. Marshall tried to perish himself. So she's like, this is your cry for help, but nothing has changed between us. I know about your arrest, Marshall. And Marshall's like, he does not want to see his daughter. And Red is like, it is cowardly to try to leave. You are selfish. You took away our choices. And we can be angry or grateful. But get your things and get out. I'm like, ooh, Red. Red don't care that you sick, Marshall. Red don't care. So the daughter walks in and she's, Marshall said there's nothing left to say and he apologizes. And she's like, you're the only father I have. You make it hard for me to still say I want to be around you, but you still have so much life to live and see. He's like, I don't know if I can. Maybe this is the best I can hope for. And she's like, if it is, then it is. And she kisses his hand and leaves. So Marshall is in Red's apartment next, and he gets a text from an unknown person saying, 5 p.m., come with me, it'll change your life. He asks, who is this? And they're like, I'm outside your house. I'm like, that is scary. Why would you even walk out the house, Marshall, to see who this is? They just sent you a text from an unknown number. And it's like, hey, come join me. And your wife is out of the coma. Stuff is going on around town. Why would you just pick up and go with someone? So we see Ford pickup is running outside. I'm sorry, Ford, but product placement. We see that Eddie is driving the Ford pickup. Eddie, remember, is the daughter's husband. But this time, Eddie's all cleaned up. No more mullet, no more hanging head, no more I should say he looked unhoused before. He's no longer looking unhoused. So Marshall jumps in the car and they drive off. So Marshall asked him about the hair. He said, I had to cut it off. He's part of a support group and they have one thing in common, but he doesn't say what it is. And Ed does say his anger has been his salvation. When has anger served? But we'll leave it there because Eddie says his anger was his salvation. So they pull up to a factory style building and Eddie pulls right up to the front. And I'm like, ooh, VIP parking. There are lots of cars outside. And then we hear a voice that says, gentlemen, tonight is special because we have a new friend. The person speaking is the robotic voice of Dr. Smith. Remember the doctor who was confined to the wheelchair that met with Lois. And I said I didn't trust Dr. Wickham. And I was happy about the, casting of Dr. Smith. But it's his robotic voice, his text to voice that's sounding, telling the gentleman we have a new friend and welcome him. So he is looking up through the floorboards as Marshall is walking in. And he's like, Dr. Smith is, we can no longer be afraid of offending people. It's the price of honesty. Dr. Smith, the price of honesty? Really? Okay. So he goes on to say, we are interviewing you. This is the Mexicali Men's Club. And I'm like, this looked like Fight Club, doctor. And it looked like you cannot participate in Fight Club. Maybe it's Fight Club of the mind, because then you can definitely participate. But he was just oh so happy to tell Marshall that this is the Mexicali Men's Club. And I'm looking at it side-eyeing, because now I'm like, who else is in here? Who else? Because the room is in a factory. It's dark. You can't see all the faces. You see Eddie and Marshall up front. AA meetings, they would all be in a circle, but Marshall's up front. He's being interviewed by Eddie to see if he should join the club. But here we see Dr. Smith is here. Who are the other men up in here? Okay. Was Justin a part of this group? Let's move on. So Eddie asked Marshall about the new pronouns, and Marshall said students are trying to explore their identities. He is getting confused though, but he's trying to keep up with all of this, but he gets it. And the men boo him. They're like, boo. And then we hear the door open and someone walks in, and there's a staircase at the back of the room that's lit, but the person is in shadow. And they're walking down, cling, cling, cling down these metal stairs. And when they reach down, we see the light and we see it's Dr. Charlie. So Ed asks, how do you see men in the culture and the shift? So Marshall's like, there's been a revolution and it's been too drastic. Men are being accused with no evidence. And Eddie's like, ooh, like you, Marshall? And Marshall doesn't say anything. He just said men who point out stuff are being called predatory. And it's second guessing their nature as men. Okay. Okay. A man gets up, okay? And he's a cop. We can see the shield on his shoulder from the jacket. And he looks like that young cop from the Coma Dream that Detective Tryon, Lois, went to Gloria's to arrest her, and that blonde cop that was with her that she took. It looks like him, but I couldn't be too sure because the scene was very, very dark, even though he was in a little bit of light. So Marshall says strong men are now frightening, but weak men are so much more dangerous. And the crowd applauds. The crowd goes wild. And I'm like, why are y'all clapping so loudly? So Ed remembers being laughed at and disrespected by women when he worked at Cinnabon in the mall. He said he had to learn not to be angry, and he had to learn to find success and rigor. I feel sorry for you, Ed, that people should not degrade you because of your level of your job. People should have some respect for you, Ed. It doesn't matter what your job is at Cinnabon or your job anywhere. So he turns to Marshall and says, Marshall, you were recently Me Too'd. We can't erase folks, who make mistakes. So how do we move forward? So we hear another person walks in. We hear the door open. We hear the steps going cling, cling, cling down the stairs. And who is it? So Marshall is trying to peer into the dark and see who it is. And he says he's struggling and angry that a consensual affair between adults is being used to hurt him. Consensual and affair. I don't like those two words together. But I could understand what you're trying to say, Marshall. It is consensual, but an affair? Your wife didn't consent to this. But let's move on. So we see the person as they sit down, and it is Dr. Wickham. I didn't trust Dr. Wickham. I never trusted Dr. Wickham. And here we are. So Ed says, your name has been destroyed. And Marshall's like, it's up to him to reclaim his name, to seek the truth. And, he tells the men that he tried to self-delete. He said a lot of men, he brought up the statistics about the number of men who try to self-delete. So Dr. Smith says there needs to be individual responsibility and order. Marshall's like, yes, this can happen through consequences. And Ed says it feels like we're living in a horror movie. And Marshall's like, maybe we need to end the boogeyman. Ed stands up and says, welcome to the club, Professor. Marshall is smiling. He is standing to a round of applause. He and Ed shake hands. And Charlie walks out of the back of the room without clapping. Put a pin in that. But here's my thing. Marshall, Eddie is the same man who cheated on your daughter with your wife. Eddie is that same man. So how you could forgive him because he is showering you with accolades now? He is helping you join the men's club? So it's all right now? Marshall, I don't believe this whole men's club, and I don't believe this. Maybe because you tried to unalive yourself. Maybe because your career is tanking. The fact that you're in a group that sees some worth to you, maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's why you're willing to shake his hand in a Mexicali men's club. So we see the daughter and Dr. Wickham walking down the hall of the hospital saying that maybe Lois checked herself in because she heard about, her dad, and she doesn't want to see the daughter, only Dr. Wickham. So the doctor asks Merritt, that's Lois and Marshall's daughter, how are you doing? And she says, hey, doc, stay focused. Stay focused on my mother. She wanted to see you. She needs to be taken care of. So the doctor walks into the psychiatric ward, and Lois thinks she is no longer alive. Lois is like, you're the only person that I trust to confirm this. And, the shock and everything has come together. The world is not real, and she has crossed over. And Dr. Wickham is like, what started all this? She's like, I never really woke up. The doctor is like, you are alive. You think you're not alive, but that's a reaction to what you're going through. And what triggered this? And she's like, Marshall and Red's visit. She's like, the man I knew would never suggest this. So she's like, she also confronted Dr. Charlie. She confronted that Dr. Charlie was having orgies in her room. And she could hear it and see it through the curtains. And she confronted him. And we cut to the scene of that conversation where she is sitting in the lunchroom of the hospital talking to Dr. Charlie. And he's like, really, Lois? Sex parties? Your mind is playing tricks on you. Your mind from the coma is playing tricks on you. She's like, yes, I believe you were doing what I said in my room. Because you are not who you present yourself to be. Dr. Charles goes on to say, I understand, what this can do to me if anyone believed you, but they won't. I effing saved your life. He yells at her. I saved your life. And I'm like, ooh, if this is not you, Dr. Charlie, why are you so hot about it? So she's like, I know, but I heard it all. I also learned about a young girl who was impregnated against her will while she was unconscious. You did that, didn't you, Dr. Charlie? He looks down and then he looks up and he yells at her. So F you, and I didn't do any of those vile things. I am so sorry for your husband. Multiple times he asked me to accidentally flip your switch so you could go on and be no longer alive. But no, he knows, that, it's because she was a massive B to her husband. But Dr. Charles said that's not what he does. So she could have descended into hell and not into heaven if he had flipped that switch. And it's a hell of her own making, and she will burn herself. Now, this is sounding like the coma dream. Remember, in the coma dream, Dr. Charlie was Father Charlie. So it's kind of sounding in that vein, his voice of hell of your own making, you will burn. It's kind of giving that. So I'm like, Lois, I'm kind of believing you about Dr. Charlie. So Lois goes on to say, this is not the real world. She's talking to Dr. Wickham. She's not alive, and she has created this hell. And Dr. Wickham said, this is temporary. So what else? She's like, the only reason she can confess is that she ended someone. Megan's man, Justin. And she, thinks it's strange that she left the scene. She told Megan she would take care of it. She was not in her right mind, and she didn't know how long she'd been driving. She caught herself and says, no, she won't cover it up, because she was going for a shovel and all kinds of other stuff to cover it up. And she says, nope, she won't cover it up because Justin was a bad man and it will be seen as self-defense. So she went back to the hotel to face what she had done. But Megan was gone. Not only Megan was gone, the entire room was clean like nothing ever happened. It was scrubbed. She's like, the cleaners came and took care of it. And Douglas like, the cleaners? She's like, yes, cleaners who clean crimes up like they never happened. She's like, that's what happened. So she said she followed Megan and she found proof. So here I am thinking she found proof. Maybe Megan was with Justin. Maybe this was a coma dream. Justin didn't get unalived. No. Megan was there with Glorious at a diner, and Lois saw them through the window. Apparently, Glorious is part of a crime group that has cleaners. And Glorious used to feed her victims to her livestock. Let's put it that way. Kind of like Hannibal Lecter. That's how it was. So she goes and Lois confronts Megan. She goes into the police station and she confronts her in the chief's office. So we see the scene and Megan closes the door as Lois starts. I did him in. And you helped. You cleaned it up. You had Glorious do it. Is that what you had her do? And Megan's like, I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, why didn't you say anything? She's like, I met her because someone in her crew was having a crisis and was in distress. So yes, I helped her out. She's like, where's your man, Megan? She's like, man, I haven't seen him in weeks. I don't know. Lois is like, I don't believe you. And now Megan's like, oh, you're all mixed up in your head. You need help. I don't trust Megan. I don't trust Megan at all. At all. Back to the hospital, Lois is like, I cannot accept that anymore. it all came together and I realized that I crossed over. She's in the afterlife. She's being forced to live out her sorrow, her misdeeds, and the wreckage, the hell of her own making. And the Dr. Wickham was sent to torture her. Dr. Wickham says he cares about her, and she looks in the corner and she sees like a camera facing her. It looks like it. And Lois is like, there's, a last piece, the whole family crime like her dream. He's like, well, I never saw anything about it in the news. She's like, it's a media blackout. It's a media blackout. And she's like, the only person who has access has to be people who has access to her files. So Dr. Wickham is like, you gave permission, you and your family, to document this and share it internally for science. And she's like, yeah, but how many people have access to my files? Dr. Wickham says hundreds, including your daughter, your husband, and another suspect is you. You could have done this. So Lois is like, we're talking about someone who unalived a baby. You think I could do that? Dr. Wickham is like, let's think this rationally, logically. You said you lost time. You couldn't think logically. You said you live in a world of crime and you would dole out justice. Maybe this person is this grotesquerie is a part of your mind. She's like, hey, I'm still here in a coma, stuck in a circle. Dr. Wickham said, let me level with you. I don't think you ended the family, etc. But you are awake and you are hearing and seeing what is not there. She's like, why the religious imagery then? He's like, you're convinced you're the last good guy. You're the last good person in the world. You are and were a small town detective in a dark time. She's like, I want to go to my room now. Now the camera pans over to the magazine rack in the corner by the door. And the magazine rack had the Catholic Guardian in it. It had Life magazine and other magazines that had a lot of religious words and connotations and pictures on it. And I'm like, are they trying to tell us that she is in a coma dream? Is that what they're trying to say? Okay. So she goes back to her room and she gets locked in. It's one of those rooms, a big old metal key, everything. She gets locked in. I was thinking her being locked in her room is not good for whoever the real perpetrator is. Because now, like Dr. Wickham tried to say, could be Lois. Lois is now locked up. She has an alibi. She is in the psychiatric ward. So if something happens, we know it's not Lois. And if Dr. Wickham is in it, that's why he's trying to get her out of the psych ward. So time passes in her room. We see it get daytime, nighttime, daytime, several times. And then Megan signs in to see her and is running down the hall, going from, through gate and through security gate, till she gets to her room. Megan starts to cry and lays on Lois's lap while Lois strokes her hair. Megan takes Lois elsewhere. We see Lois dressed in her usual detective outfit, the light color jacket and shirt. And, Megan apologizes for asking Lois for help when she's having her mental crisis. And Lois is like, why did you call me then? Why? Why ask? And Megan's like, when they called me, it was way worse than she thought. She's like, well, why call me? How is this worse than the Burnside family? So Megan said, this is bigger. It's immense in its scope. She knows some of the people. She's like, you know some of them too. Lois is like, I'm done. I'm no longer a detective. Megan's like, please, we need you. This is real. Lois is like, this is not real. Stop trying to tell me this. Megan's like, this person is using fear to get us to act and stay in line. You are not unalived. You are here. This is real. This is now. You did end Justin. And I did call Glorious to clean it up. And it happened. I am so sorry. Lois, if you don't slap Megan right now, but again, that wouldn't be cool. Megan is a DV survivor. Justin did that enough to her. I should not have said that. Lois, if you don't shake or have some words with Megan right about now, oh my word. I knew Megan was playing with her mind in that hotel room. So Lois asked, why lie? Megan's like, to protect you from my mistake. So Lois just breathes heavily and is like, show me. And they walk into the room. The cops are staring at the scene ahead of them, just like in the coma dream. Lois walks around them to see it, and Megan is behind her. Megan, is the chief. And I'm like, in the coma dream, Lois used to say, why is Sister Megan there sometimes ahead of the cops in the crime scene? And I'm thinking, because Megan is actually the chief of police, so that's why she would appear at the crime scene before Lois. So it's the Last Supper scene, and they both go and sit in the plastic cover pews at the back of the room. Lois says the Jesus figure touched her heart. She's like literally touched her heart with the defibrillator and brought her back from her coma. It was Dr. Charlie's in the Jesus position. She said the other figures are unhoused figures, and Megan said except for one. She knew one. The Crowlesby lady who recently accused Marshall of assault, SA. So Lois starts getting up and say, okay, all right, people, bag everything, do your job, meet me back at my old office. Jack is like, oh, you gonna help us, Lois? She's like, of course I'm going to help us. Who else is going to solve this case? And Megan is like, Lois, that's just, that's a little too much. That's a little too much of a dig. And she's like, it's necessary. It's also the truth. And we need to start telling each other the truth. I know who did this. Y'all have 1 hour. Meet me back in my office. And Lois walks out of the crime scene. And then we get the credits. Grotesquerie. This is the end. This is the finale. I'm sorry. This is no kind of finale for me. I'm sorry. I would take this as a mid-season finale. Maybe we're in the middle of the season, but most seasons nowadays have 10 episodes. This is not how I would end the first season to get to the second season. Now we got to wait, 6 months, a year? Now we know who did it. We know who did it. I'm going to say I know who did it. Marshall did it. Marshall is Grotesquerie. Marshall is a family member who has access to this. Also, Marshall has motive to end the student that accused him and started to ruin his life. Charlie, Dr. Charlie, saved his wife and brought her back when he didn't want her back. So I can see Marshall doing this because otherwise I don't see anyone else. Who else is on the list of potentials? But I gotta say, I was fearful for Red when she told Marshall he needed to go. I was really fearful for her. But we shall see what's up with episode 2. I thank you very much for joining me for this finale of Grotesquerie. I was disappointed. I hope you were not disappointed. But if you were disappointed like myself, please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about what's going on in Grotesquerie, how they're setting up season 2, and who do you trust? Because I don't know if the men's club is really the men's club. Are we in Marshall's coma dreams? Are we just moving from one coma dream to the other? Let me know what you think. Please like the video, share it with a friend, comment below, and give me your thoughts. And I will see you in the next one. Let me know what else you would like me to review. I am doing Love is Blind seasons, and I know Love is Blind Argentina is coming up. So I hope you will join me for that one. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.